What if I told you that Halloween isn't just a harmless night of costumes and candy, but a doorway to something far darker? A night when the boundaries between the living and the dead blur and ancient pagan rituals resurface, disguised as fun. Behind the masks, behind the candy lies a celebration with roots that go deeper than most realize, a celebration that is deeply connected to the occult, pagan worship, and Satanism. Every year, millions flock to Halloween parties, dress up as demons and witches, and revel in the thrills of fear and horror. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, what are we really celebrating? Is it just a harmless tradition, or does it carry with it a sinister agenda that few understand? For centuries, Halloween has been linked to the dead, the supernatural, and the worship of forces that oppose everything good and holy. While many dismiss these connections as superstition, the truth is Halloween's origins are far from innocent. From its beginnings with ancient Celtic practices that involved human sacrifice to modern satanic groups proudly claiming it as their own holiday, Halloween is far from being just a fun celebration. In this video, we'll uncover the disturbing roots of Halloween and why for Christians it's a night that should be avoided. From the occult practices that permeate the night to the way Halloween has been twisted into something seemingly harmless yet deeply destructive, we will examine it all. By the end, you'll see Halloween for what it truly is, not a night of harmless fun, but a dangerous gateway to spiritual darkness. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Let's dive in. 1. Halloween is not a Christian holiday. Despite its modern portrayal as a fun night of costumes and candy, Halloween's origins are deeply rooted in paganism, and its evolution over centuries has been shaped by practices that contradict Christian values and beliefs. The history of Halloween traces back over 2,000 years to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, which marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. This festival was centered around the belief that on the night of October 31st, the barrier between the living and the dead was thinnest, allowing spirits to roam freely. The Celts believed that the souls of the dead returned to earth, and to protect themselves from evil spirits, people would wear costumes and masks. These practices had no connection to Christianity, and in fact were rooted in polytheistic beliefs and the worship of multiple gods. With the spread of Christianity across Europe, the Church sought to convert pagans by replacing their festivals with Christian holidays. In the 7th century, Pope Boniface V established All Saints' Day, a day to honor Christian martyrs, and later Pope Gregory III moved it to November 1st, just after Samhain. The evening before became known as All Hallows' Eve, which over time morphed into the modern-day Halloween. However, despite these efforts, the pagan roots of Halloween remained, and the holiday continued to incorporate elements of occultism, spirit worship, and superstition. For Christians, the connection to the occult is a significant concern. Halloween's association with witches, demons, and the dead is contrary to the teachings of the Bible. The Bible warns against engaging in occult practices, such as necromancy and divination, both of which are central to the historical and modern celebrations of Halloween. In Deuteronomy 18:10-12, God explicitly condemns these practices, making it clear that they have no place in the life of a believer. Moreover, Halloween promotes values that conflict with Christian teaching. The night is often filled with drunkenness, sexual immorality, and fear, which stand in stark contrast to the Christian call to live holy, upright lives. Ephesians, the Bible calls Christians to avoid activities that glorify darkness and evil, and Halloween, with its focus on the supernatural, fear and death, runs directly counter to this. In conclusion, Halloween is not a Christian holiday. It is deeply rooted in pagan and occult traditions, and its modern celebration continues to promote values that are inconsistent with the Christian faith. For Christians, participating in Halloween should raise serious questions about the message it sends and the spiritual implications it carries. 2. Connection to paganism and occultism. The connection between Halloween and paganism is undeniable and goes far beyond just the superficial celebration we know today. Halloween's origins can be traced back over 2,000 years to ancient Celtic practices, where it began as the festival of Samhain, marking the end of the harvest season and the transition into winter. The Celts, who were polytheistic and deeply connected to nature, believed that on the night of October 31st, the boundary between the living and the dead became thin. This belief set the stage for the dark spiritual undertones of Halloween that persist to this day. The Celts celebrated Samhain with rituals to honor the dead, believing that on this night spirits of the deceased returned to earth, reconnecting with their families. The presence of these spirits was not always seen as a blessing though. The Celts believed that evil spirits could cause harm, so they engaged in protective rituals like dressing in disguises or masks to hide from malevolent forces. This practice is directly reflected in today's Halloween tradition of dressing up in costume. The Celts also made offerings to the spirits, much like the modern practice of trick-or-treating, which, although now secularized, is a remnant of these ancient pagan rituals. As the centuries passed and Christianity spread across Europe, efforts were made to overshadow Samhain by establishing Christian holidays like All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, but the pagan roots of Halloween remained embedded in the culture. Over time, these practices evolved into the secularized version of Halloween we recognize today, but the underlying pagan and occult influences linger. Occultism, which refers to the pursuit of hidden knowledge and practices forbidden by the Bible, also has a significant place in Halloween's history. Occult practices like astrology, witchcraft, and the worship of spirits have been closely linked to Halloween. The occult is centered around deception and the manipulation of spiritual forces for personal gain, a concept that aligns with the darker, more sinister side of Halloween. For centuries, occult groups have used this night to engage in rituals, ceremonies, and celebrations that are not just pagan but also explicitly satanic. Halloween, in its modern form, may appear to be just a night of fun, but at its core, it is deeply tied to the pagan reverence for the dead, the occult's obsession with hidden forces, and the satanic worship of evil. Recognizing this connection is key to understanding why Halloween is not just a celebration of costumes, but a night fraught with spiritual dangers. Every year, millions embrace this night of celebration, believing it's just a harmless opportunity for fun, dressing up and indulging in candy. However, beneath the surface, Halloween fosters a culture that encourages temptation and sin in numerous ways. At its core, temptation is the urge or desire to act in ways that go against moral values or divine principles. It entices people to give in to behaviors that are not aligned with righteousness, leading them further away from their true purpose. Halloween, with its atmosphere of indulgence, easily draws individuals into acts of excess, immorality, and hedonism. It's a night when societal norms about restraint, self-control, and modesty are often thrown out the window. For many, it becomes a time to indulge their deepest desires without the usual consequences. From excessive drinking to lustful behavior and promiscuity, Halloween amplifies these temptations. The temptation to sin is especially heightened on this night. During Halloween, people often engage in reckless behavior under the guise of fun. Parties become a breeding ground for immoral acts, as boundaries that typically govern human behavior are blurred. People, especially the younger generation, are encouraged to dress provocatively or adopt dark and unsettling personas, often in stark contrast to the values they might otherwise uphold. This moral disconnect creates a space for sin to thrive. Furthermore, Halloween can often lead people into glorifying fear, darkness, and evil. The fascination with horror, monsters, and death can desensitize individuals, especially the young, to the true consequences of sin. What's presented as harmless fun or just a thrill can easily turn into an obsession with darker forces, eventually leading to an unhealthy relationship with sin. In Christianity, sin is viewed as a rebellion against God's will. Temptation is not inherently sinful, but when one gives into that temptation, it leads to destructive consequences. Halloween, with its themes of occultism, witchcraft, and the glorification of darkness, is a powerful tool in Satan's arsenal to weaken moral convictions and seduce people into sin. By making sin look fun or harmless, Halloween distorts the reality of sin's impact on one's life. In conclusion, Halloween is not just about costumes and candy. It's a night that fosters temptation, encourages sinful behavior, and lures individuals away from their values. The true danger lies not in the festivities themselves, but in how easily they lead to spiritual compromise. Roots of Halloween. The roots of Halloween stretch back over 2,000 years, rooted deeply in ancient pagan traditions. It all begins with the Celtic festival of Samhain, celebrated by the Celts in ancient Britain and Ireland. Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, a time of year associated with death and darkness. The Celts believed that during Samhain, the veil between the living and the dead was thin, allowing spirits to cross over from the other side. This belief made the festival a time for honoring the deceased and performing rituals to appease the spirits, which they believed could bring either blessings or curses. One of the key aspects of Samhain was its connection to the dead. The Celts thought that on October 31st, the Lord of Death gathered the souls of the dead and decided whether they would be reincarnated as animals or humans. This belief led to the tradition of lighting bonfires and wearing costumes to protect oneself from wandering spirits. People would wear masks or disguises, hoping to blend in with the spirits or ward off malicious ones. These customs form the basis of modern Halloween traditions, like dressing up in costumes to this day. As Christianity spread through Europe, it clashed with these pagan practices. In an effort to replace Samhain with a Christian celebration, the Church established All Saints' Day on November 1st, dedicated to honoring Christian martyrs. The night before this day became known as All Hallows' Eve, which eventually evolved into the Halloween we recognize today. Despite this Christian overlay, many of the old pagan customs persisted, including the practice of honoring the dead and engaging in rituals that involved supernatural forces. Over time, Halloween became more secularized. By the 19th century, it had become a holiday primarily focused on community gatherings, costumes, and parties. In the 20th century, Hollywood and commercial interests further transformed Halloween into a major consumer event, with haunted houses, horror movies, and candy as central components. However, the roots of Halloween remained undeniable, deeply tied to ancient pagan worship, ancestor veneration, and rituals associated with death and the supernatural. Despite its modern commercialization, the spiritual origins of Halloween are still significant, often tied to occult practices and the glorification of fear. 5. Christian influence. The Christian influence on Halloween is complex, as the holiday's roots are deeply entwined with ancient pagan and occult practices. However, over the centuries, the Church made deliberate attempts to reshape the holiday to align with Christian belief. This process began as Christianity spread throughout Europe, challenging the pagan practices that had been firmly established for centuries. One of the most significant Christian influences on Halloween came in the form of All Saints' Day. In the 7th century, Pope Boniface I established this day on May 13 to honor Christian martyrs. However, in 85 AD, Pope Gregory I moved the observance of All Saints' Day to November 1, coinciding with the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, which marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark winter months. This shift effectively aligned the Christian feast day with the pre-existing pagan festival. The night before November 1st, known as All Hallows' Eve, became a time to prepare for the celebration of saints and martyrs. Over time, All Hallows' Eve was shortened to Halloween, which became associated with Christian reverence for the dead, particularly those in purgatory. In the 11th century, All Souls' Day was introduced by the Church on November 2nd to pray for the souls of the deceased. This gave rise to the tradition of souling, where the poor, often children, would go door to door asking for soul cakes in exchange for prayers for the dead. This practice laid the groundwork for what is now known as trick-or-treating. Despite these Christian adaptations, many of Halloween's pagan elements remained intact. The focus on spirits, death, and the supernatural continued to align with earlier beliefs, such as the Celtic idea that the boundary between the living and the dead was thinnest on the night of Samhain. While Christianity sought to transform the holiday into a time of prayer and remembrance for the dead, it struggled to eliminate the darker occult associations tied to Halloween. In modern times, Halloween has largely lost its religious significance and is often viewed as a secular celebration. However, its Christian roots remain an essential part of its history, and for many, the Church's efforts to reframe the holiday serve as a reminder of the tension between Christian values and the deeply ingrained pagan traditions that continue to influence the celebration. Modern transformation. Over the last century, Halloween has undergone a significant transformation, evolving from a deeply rooted pagan and occult tradition into a widely celebrated secular event. This shift didn't happen by accident. The commercial and cultural forces behind Halloween's modern incarnation have worked tirelessly to reframe the holiday as a light-hearted occasion centered around fun and entertainment, far removed from its dark origins. The transformation began in the early 20th century when Halloween became increasingly popular in mainstream American culture. At this time, the focus shifted from its religious and occult associations to more family-friendly activity. Trick-or-treating became one of the central traditions, a practice with roots in the Christian observance of All Souls' Day. Over time, it was detached from its spiritual context, turning into a fun-filled activity for children to collect candy and engage in playful mischief. Hollywood played a major role in shaping modern Halloween. As film studios capitalized on horror themes, Halloween began to be associated with haunted houses, creepy decorations, and a fascination with all things spooky. Horror movies like Halloween 1978, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th catapulted the holiday's connection to fear and gore, cementing its association with frightful entertainment. What was once a night of occult rituals and dark beliefs became a platform for fantasy and thrill. By the mid-20th century, Halloween had fully entered the commercial realm. Retailers began selling costumes, decorations, and candy in bulk, turning it into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Halloween's appeal broadened not just to children but also to adults who saw it as an opportunity for parties and escapism. The costumes, once based on spirits and demons, were now more likely to include pop culture references, superheroes, and anything that could be marketed as fun. The marketing and commercialization of Halloween also distanced the holiday from its pagan roots. Through clever advertising, Halloween was rebranded as a time for families to come together, carve pumpkins, and enjoy harmless thrills. This transformation was largely driven by the retail sector, which made it easy and appealing for people to embrace Halloween without considering its more troubling origin. In summary, Halloween's modern transformation from a pagan festival to a secular celebration is a direct result of the cultural shifts, commercialization, and media influence that redefined the holiday's purpose. What was once a night dedicated to spirits, the occult, and pagan rites is now seen by many as nothing more than a fun-filled occasion for costumes, candy, and parties. However, beneath this surface lies a history that many overlook or choose to ignore. 7. Satanic celebration. Halloween is not just a night for spooky costumes and candy, it's deeply intertwined with satanic rituals and practices. While many view it as an innocent celebration, the reality is far darker. For centuries, Halloween has been a key date for Satanists and occultists who see it as a sacred occasion for worship and dark rituals. At the core of Halloween's dark association with Satanism is its roots in ancient pagan practices. Halloween, originally known as Samhain, was a Celtic festival marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. The Celts believed that on the night of October 31st, the boundary between the living and the dead was at its thinnest, allowing spirits to cross over. This made it a prime time for demonic activity, and Satanists even today view it as an opportunity to summon evil forces and strengthen their ties with the occult. In modern times, the satanic connection to Halloween is still very much alive. The founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaMabe, made it clear that Halloween is a celebration for Satanists. According to LaMabe, Halloween is one of the most important holidays for his followers, as it aligns with their belief in celebrating sin and indulging in desires without restraint. It's a night where they can openly engage in practices like black magic, witchcraft, and invoke demonic forces under the guise of celebration. Moreover, Halloween provides a perfect cover for satanic ritual. The atmosphere of fear, death, and the supernatural that permeates the night aligns perfectly with satanic beliefs, which often center around rebellion, darkness, and the glorification of death. It's not just about dressing up in costumes, it's about embracing the macabre, indulging in horror, and even worshipping evil entities. The glorification of darkness on Halloween is also evident in mainstream celebrations, where haunted houses, horror movies, and violent imagery dominate. These elements reflect satanic values, as they perpetuate fear, death, and a fascination with the occult. Satanists capitalize on this, seeing Halloween as a time when society unknowingly worships the forces they revere: darkness, chaos, and rebellion. For Satanists, Halloween isn't just a night of harmless fun, it's a spiritually significant event. It serves as a moment to invoke evil, strengthen their spiritual ties to Satan, and celebrate their rejection of traditional morality and religious values. So, while many treat Halloween as a playful celebration for others, it's a dangerous and solemn occasion for the worship of darkness. 8. Christianity and Halloween. Halloween, as celebrated today, has become a cultural phenomenon filled with costumes, candy, and spooky fun. However, for many Christians, the question arises, should they participate in this celebration? Or does Halloween pose a threat to their faith? To answer this, it's crucial to understand Halloween's origins, its associations with paganism and occultism, and the biblical teachings about the practices involved. The roots of Halloween trace back over 2,000 years to the Celtic festival of Samhain, a time when people believed the barrier between the living and the dead was thin. The Celts would light bonfires and offer sacrifices to spirits to ensure a good harvest and protection from evil. Over time, Christianity spread across Europe, and in an attempt to replace pagan rituals, the Church established All Saints' Day on November 1st, a day dedicated to honoring Christian martyrs. This led to the creation of All Hallows' Eve, the night before All Saints' Day, which eventually evolved into what we now know as Halloween. Despite these Christian influences, many of the pagan traditions remain, such as dressing in costumes and honoring the dead. For Christians, this connection to paganism and the occult raises significant concerns. The Bible warns against practices related to witchcraft, divination, and the worship of false gods, which are central elements of pagan and occult ritual. Verses like Deuteronomy 18:10-12 and Galatians 5:19-21 make it clear that Christians should avoid engaging in practices that are linked to these dark spiritual forces. Halloween, with its focus on death, the supernatural, and spirits, can be seen as a celebration of these things, which is contrary to Christian teachings about life, holiness, and the worship of the one true God. Moreover, Halloween often promotes themes of fear, darkness, and even glorifies evil. The Bible teaches Christians to focus on purity, goodness, and truth. Philippians 4:8. Participating in a holiday that glorifies fear, the occult, and demonic imagery goes against the call to live according to Christ's light. While some may argue that Halloween is merely a secular holiday today, Christians are called to be distinct from the world. Ephesians 5:11 urges believers to have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. The question isn't about how the world celebrates Halloween, but how Christians should uphold their faith and avoid participating in something that may open the door to spiritual harm. In conclusion, Christians are advised to be cautious about Halloween. While it may seem like innocent fun to some, its roots and current associations with paganism and the occult make it spiritually dangerous. Instead, believers are encouraged to focus on honoring God, spreading His light, and avoiding the temptation to participate in practices that contradict biblical teachings. Halloween, despite its mainstream popularity and light-hearted appeal, stands in stark contrast to Christian beliefs and values. For many, it's a time of fun and celebration, but for those who understand its origins, it represents a spiritual minefield, one that Christians should actively avoid. Here's why. Pagan roots. Halloween traces its origins to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, a time when people believed the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest. It was a pagan ritual involving sacrifices, dark rites, and the honoring of spirit. This foundation, deeply rooted in idol worship and the occult, cannot be ignored. For Christians, participating in a holiday with such origins means aligning oneself with practices that go against the teachings of the Bible. Occult practices. Halloween has long been associated with occultism, divination, witchcraft, astrology, and Satanism. Even though Halloween has evolved into a secular celebration of costumes and candy, the supernatural themes remain deeply embedded in the holiday. The use of symbols like ghosts, witches, and demons invites the glorification of the dark forces that the Bible warns against. Engaging with these themes, even in a playful context, can open doors to spiritual harm. A celebration of darkness, the Bible consistently urges believers to avoid celebrating death, fear, or the glorification of evil. Passages such as Ephesians 5:11 and 2 Corinthians 6:14-17 encourage Christians to stay away from deeds of darkness and not to be unequally yoked with forces that promote evil. Halloween, with its emphasis on death, horror, and fear, directly contradicts these scriptures. Christians are called to be the light in a dark world, not to celebrate the darkness, the influence of Satan. The most troubling aspect of Halloween is its endorsement by Satanic and neo-pagan groups. Many Satanists openly declare Halloween as their official holiday, reveling in the symbolism of darkness and death. In this context, Halloween becomes more than just a cultural tradition. It is an invitation to embrace values and practices that oppose the truth of Christ. For Christians, celebrating Halloween, knowingly or unknowingly, may be seen as participating in a spiritual battle on the wrong side. Moral integrity and witnessing. Christians are called to live by a higher standard, not to conform to the patterns of the world. Romans. Halloween's indulgence in sin, drunkenness, sexual immorality, and hedonism reflects everything the Christian faith rejects. By rejecting Halloween, Christians can stand firm in their moral convictions and witness to a world that desperately needs the light of Christ. For Christians, the rejection of Halloween is not about fear or legalism, but about protecting one's spiritual well-being and honoring God by distancing oneself from practices that undermine faith and righteousness. 10. Prayer and protection. Prayer and protection are essential elements in maintaining spiritual and emotional well-being, especially in the face of dangers both seen and unseen. For many, prayer is a direct line of communication with a higher power, a way to seek guidance, peace, and strength in times of trouble. Protection in a spiritual sense refers to divine intervention that shields individuals from harm, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. In times of darkness, such as during Halloween or other occasions steeped in negative energy or harmful practices, many turn to prayer as a source of defense. Prayers for protection are meant to create a spiritual shield, safeguarding the individual from negative forces, harmful spirits, or influences that may threaten their well-being. This is not just about avoiding physical harm, but about protecting the soul from falling into temptation or spiritual deception. When praying for protection, it is important to recognize that we are not merely seeking physical safety. Protection encompasses guarding against the spiritual dangers that can cloud judgment, stir up fear, or invite evil influences. For Christians, prayer can serve as a powerful reminder that God's love and grace are sufficient to overcome any force of darkness. Invoking His presence can create an atmosphere of peace and security, dispelling fear and uncertainty. Key aspects of a prayer for protection include recognizing God's sovereignty and asking for His guidance. A simple, heartfelt prayer might sound like this: Lord, I ask for your protection over my mind, my heart, and my soul. Shield me from the lies of the enemy and cover me with your love and light. Keep me safe from harm and lead me on the path of righteousness. Help me to stay strong in faith and to trust in your power to deliver me from evil. Amen. Additionally, the act of prayer is also a declaration of faith. It affirms that no matter the trials or temptations, divine protection is a constant, unwavering force. Prayer in this sense is not just about asking for protection, but about establishing a deep trust in the belief that no evil can prevail over those under God's care. By praying consistently and with purpose, individuals can feel fortified against the spiritual dangers around them, finding comfort and strength to face any challenge with confidence. Ultimately, prayer and protection go hand in hand, offering a spiritual refuge and allowing believers to remain steadfast even in the most troubling time. In conclusion, Halloween may seem like a harmless occasion filled with costumes and candy, but its roots run deep in ancient paganism, occult practices, and even Satanism. The night is more than just a celebration of fear and thrill. It is a doorway that invites spiritual dangers, leading many unknowingly down a path that opposes the values of faith, purity, and truth. Whether we realize it or not, participating in Halloween can connect us to forces that promote darkness, fear, and sin. For Christians, the message is clear. We are called to be separate from the world's temptations and to protect our hearts and minds from spiritual deception. Prayer and protection serve as powerful tools in guarding against these dangers, offering a way to stay firm in our faith and trust in God's guidance. As you consider your choices this Halloween, remember that we are not just fighting physical battles, but spiritual ones. Choosing to reject Halloween is not about being judgmental, but about standing firm in your beliefs and prioritizing God's truth over the world's allure. Let us pray for strength, wisdom, and protection, and seek to walk in the light, free from the snares of darkness.